One of the basic necessities of life is housing. In a country like Nigeria, with an estimated population of over 180 million people, the need for government to ensure that the people have good housing is not only necessary but critical. However, this has not been the case. For decades and after successive administrations in Nigeria, a truly national housing program that seeks to provide affordable housing for the average Nigerian has happened only twice, between 1979 and 1983, when Shehu Shagari was President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and the present administration under President Muhammadu Buhari. With improved funding and a clear mandate to provide affordable housing for the people of Nigeria, the Federal Ministry of Power, Works and Housing, with Babatunde Fashola SAN as Minister and his Ministers of State, Surveyor Usman Hassan Zama and Mustafa Babashehuri, set out to understand the peculiarities of the housing sector in Nigeria and how best to approach this mandate. Today, Nigeria has a truly national housing program that is delivering housing that is not only affordable but acceptable.
There is the temptation to mix policy with program, and I think that they're two different things. Affordable housing is a global policy which almost every nation has subscribed to. How do you deliver that? Those are matters of programs and actions. So do you want to build X housing unit? What type of housing unit? And so on and so forth. Now, what the Buhari administration has embarked upon is a national housing program. This is the second time that is happening in my own lifetime's experience. This is not to say that other governments have not done housing in interventions, but none on a national scale. And that is what we are implementing now. The other thing that I want to add to that is to say that we have learned a lot from the errors of yesterday, and it is now manifesting in our decision to first run a pilot program based on investigation, research, consultation with some of the would-be end users and off-takers to find out what type of housing they want, what type of income they earn, and how much they are willing to pay. But as we speak about housing, let me also correct another perhaps common assumption that we need to change. That housing must be defined beyond ownership. It must include rental housing. The assumption is that once you talk about housing, everybody must own a home. No economy has delivered 100% home ownership in any part of the world, and I stand to be corrected. It is always a mixture of ownership and rental. The ultimate goal being to increase the number of people who migrate from rental to become owners and reduce the number of people who lose their housing and who are unable to afford ownership. And two models that I've studied extensively, the Singaporean and the UK model, are very good case studies that have guided my thoughts on this matter for the last 1 decade.
The Federal Ministry of Power, Works and Housing through the housing program is not only building houses that believe is good for the people, but building in almost all the states of the Federation and ensuring that houses built are affordable and acceptable to the people they are meant for. The program is so carried out to ensure that people of the state directly or indirectly benefit financially and in terms of employment from the projects. These projects, though federal government owned, has the involvement of individual state governments, hence making it an all-inclusive venture.
When a nation commits to infrastructure, generally, one of the things it wants to see is improved quality of public utilities, transportation, water supply, shipping, and so on and so forth. But that is the end game. The immediate gain is growth in the economy, employment for some of the most vulnerable people in the society, and a movement of goods and services within the economy. And that is what we are beginning to see already from the housing program we have started in the entire country, where construction is now going on in 33 states. We asked each state to give us land because, as you know, the current land legislative regime vests land in the state governors. As I said earlier, we also wanted to prove a concept that shows that we have learned something from the first national housing program. So one of the things we are subjecting our pilot to is acceptability in the way that it is built. So we asked the governors, give us no more than 10 hectares. Let us use those 10 hectares to build in your state what our research and consultations suggest to us that your people will accept and they can afford. So 33 states gave us land. We are still waiting for 3 states, Bayelsa, Lagos. I think we have land from Rivers now, but there are still challenges about access and so on. So those are 3 states we're still waiting to hear from. But in all those 33 states now, what we found out is that largely in the north, they prefer us to build bungalows. In the south, they are not averse to blocks of flats. But either way, they don't mind whether it's 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, or 3 bedroom. That is what they share in common.
The need to have white-collar jobs, get involved in politics, enjoy the conveniences of the urban centers, and the total neglect of the agricultural sector by Nigerians has caused a rural-urban migration, which has stretched facilities in the urban centers and exaggerated the housing deficit in the country. This administration is addressing this problem in a creative and workable manner that is yielding positive results already.
There are people who require houses, okay? But the question is, the pressures we feel in the urban centers, people migrating from rural to urban centers, does not factor in the houses they have left empty or the homes that they have left from where they originated. And so when President Buhari focuses on agriculture, one of the things you will see is a slowdown ultimately in rural-urban migration. That's what we are already seeing. People who used to lease out their land to farmers to farm are now the ones saying, we're not leasing out our land again, we're farming on our land. So they're not moving away again. And you see more of that as the agricultural activity deepens. But that is one index in quantifying what the real deficit is. Then there are houses that are empty, even in urban centers, simply because people cannot afford or people do not accept how they were built, or a combination of both. Either the rental income is too high, or the house is too big, or too small for the need of the person. So in really discussing the deficit, we must factor all of these as well. Then how did we arrive at those figures that we are banding around? Because the basis for computing these kind of things is a credible census. So at the very best is approximated guessworks that you have. So we need to do a new census. We understand that not enough houses exist. We understand that some are too expensive. We understand that some don't like the way they are built. But we are not going to be prisoners of a deficit. We are going to continue to work on a methodical basis. And what we want to do is pilot what we are doing, prove that it works, prove that people like it, prove that people accept it, so that they won't be like the old Shagari housing estate. I have requests now, I think, from Kwara. I have requests from, I think, Taraba, and one other state. People just writing to us to say, look, we want to take over this place, we want to refurbish them. They've been empty.
The Muhammadu Buhari administration has a policy of growing the nation's economy through infrastructural development. With this in mind, the Ministry of Power, Works and Housing is not only building houses, but using the housing program as a strategy for job creation for the most vulnerable population in the country and movement of goods and services. With an average of 1,000 people working in all 33 sites all over the country, and in some cases as much as 1,600 people working, the housing sector is a very effective way of creating employment and encouraging trade in and around the sites nationwide. This means that there is improved financial activity and more money is circulating, which positively affects the country's economy.
This is clearly well thought out strategy by the president and the party, and the government is faithfully implementing these programs. And in all the states where I have been, the housing estates, the purpose of infrastructure, as I said, is already being met in the very first contact, creating employment for the most vulnerable people. I remember one man that I met in, two young men that I met in Taraba, I remember, and in Bauchi, and they said to me, they were bricklayers, masons, and they said to me, please thank President Buhari for us. We didn't have work before this housing project started. We are now employed. I remember the couple that I met in Oyo. The husband was a builder, the wife was a food vendor. They had migrated from Lagos to Oyo. They said the housing programs have slowed down and they saw a new opportunity. So the wife sells food to all of the workers on site, the husband builds. In the same construction station in Oyo, I remember one man who delivered a cement mixer. And when I asked him when he came to site, he said he moved to that site about 2 weeks before my visit. And I asked him what he was doing before then. He said, oh, that work, there was no work. And once there is no work, what you are heading into is actually a recession. But I asked him again, how much does he earn with that mixer? I said, every day that that mixer is on site, he earns 20,000 naira a day. I remember the carpenters I met in the Gwagwalada site. They were roadside carpenters. Business was infrequent. But they said, when they saw construction going on in the housing project in Gwagwalada, they moved there. So they are now helping to construct panels used for form work, for casting concrete. So our contractor employed you?
Yes, sir.
So which one is better, this one or the roadside?
This one is better because at least here we have gained so many experience.
Okay, you're learning.
Yes,
also.
it's just like institution.
Okay. So why don't you stay on your own? Why do you come here?
I come here because I wanted to gain more experience. And now I have more experience on the work. And the payment is very good. It's very attractive.
Where is my own share?
We will discuss that later.
Okay. I remember, and this I will not forget because he bears the same name with my orderly, Ado, that I met in Kaduna. Ado was one of the laborers on the site, and as I was leaving, he was next to me, so I decided to chat him up. And that's when he told me his name. I introduced myself, and he laughed when I introduced myself and asked for his name. And so I asked him what he had been. He said no, that he'd moved to that site a couple of months back. He was unemployed before, and he was looking for money because there was a woman he wanted to marry, but he couldn't afford to pay the bride price. And that he had made enough money to pay the bride price. He had married the woman, and they were now expecting a child. So for these people, President Buhari has delivered, and there are thousands of them. I remember the workers I met at the Kano site, the electrician who was working for one of the contractors there, how enthusiastic he was at his work. You like this one?
This work? I like it because I am helping myself through it.
You're helping yourself?
Yes, and
how?
My family.
You help family?
Yeah, I have a wife.
You help your wife?
Yes.
Another Ado.
And one child?
Yes, sir. I like that very well.
Yes, make you do more?
Yes, I want to continue this.
To continue this one?
Yes.
Again, let me repeat. When you hear that the Ministry of Power, Works and Housing has a budget or the largest budget, this is what happens to that budget. We are just a conduit for moving it on to the people of Nigeria through contracts that are awarded, work that is done, payments that are made, concrete, cement that is mixed, woodwork that is done by carpenters, iron rods that is put together, bound together by laborers. So that's what happens to that budget. This is the destination of the budget. And on each of those housing constructions, the minimum number of workers you see there is 1,000. Some are 1,900, some are 1,600. So those are people for whom, first of all, the president has hit the bullseye. Not only in what they say in appreciation, but in the objective of ensuring that the most vulnerable people, plumbers, carpenters, masons, welders, electricians, can go back to work. Now, but that is not the end of the story. That's just the beginning. Quarrying, mining has picked up, according to the MBS statistics. That's infrastructure for construction. What are they mining? Sand, laterite, limestone, all of the materials used for construction, rocks. Now, at every site, there's an exchange. They're supplying materials, transporting them. Water suppliers, food vendors.
Because if there's no work, no business now. If there's work, there is business. And we businesswomen will improve from there. So one improvement from there again, more again. Because we need more work again like this.
That is the story of how we got out of recession. It is empirical. At the end of each business day, those people make money. They go back home with pride to face their families and put money on the table. What do you do here? Tell
Speaking with you is Engineer Obot, material metallurgy, graduated from Futo. I'm the one handling mechanical aspect here. So it has been so implemented as designed, no deviation. So it is my delight to see this project coming to my community, and we as well cooperate with all the contractors and even with the federal government to ensure that the further project that has been assigned to other states is assigned to us. And we want to see more. We are most grateful.
You chop inside?
To the presidency. I chop inside.
Talk the thing where you chop inside.
What thing I chop inside is the mechanical implementation of this project, even our condominium.
That's what the president meant in the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan when he said a commitment to invest in the Nigerian people. That's a commitment that is obviously being played out.
The interesting thing about the housing program adopted by the Federal Ministry of Power, Works and Housing is that it is not only building houses for Nigerians, but has a clear-cut way of directly and positively affecting the economy. Babatunde Fashola SAN explains what he terms the housing economy, what it is, how it affects the people now, and what it will do for the people and the country's economy in the near future.
We've talked about those who are employed, those who are supplying, and those who are actually involved in many aspects of developing the housing units. I've spoken to you about the average number of people employed in each site, over 1,000. So, assuming that as we prove the concept and we validate our pilot, so instead of one site in a state, we now have 5, 6 sites in a state. It means that over 1,000 people in 5 places times 36. That's the housing economy at its base. Let me move that forward a little more. We have prescribed also that no appliances in the housing value chain should be used except made in Nigeria, unless there are things that we can't manufacture. So just assume that the current supplies now are raised to 5 times their demand. It means that all of the small and medium enterprises who make paint, nails, wires, tiles, wash hand basins, locks, ceilings, electrical fittings need to multiply their production by times 5. That means that all of our people who are looking for work have opportunities to work in small and medium-sized factories producing made in Nigeria housing components. But that is not the end of the story. As houses are being built and those numbers go to 5 times their value, our brothers and sisters who operate the mines where the building materials are produced from have to not double, times 5, really, 5-fold their current output. You will need more trucks to move. You will consume more fuel to transport those materials. You will need more tires. You will need more drivers. As the number of people working on site increase, vendors will output more food. Farmers will grow more. Again, the housing economic story is not finished. When the houses reach completion, they need to be furnished. So you need carpets, you need curtains, you need all sorts of accessories. The markets, the manufacturers take position. Tailors will make money. Upholstery, furniture. It's a continuing economy. And as the houses are moved into, what then happens? Insurance kicks in. You buy a house, you want to insure it against fire. Those are the possibilities that lie ahead. But it isn't even done. When you are insured, you now have maintenance obligations. Okay? As the maintenance obligations kick in, you now have to hire the local plumber, the local painter, the local electrician once in a year, once every 6 months. Your air conditioning, your fan, the compressor is not working well, call it. If it doesn't happen unless you own a home. So that's the economy that has driven the United Kingdom since 1918.
With a history of successive administrations neglecting or shutting down programs and projects of their predecessors, no matter how good or important it is to the economy and the people of Nigeria, one wonders how such a laudable program will be sustained.
We have demonstrated that a new Nigeria is upon us. What used to perhaps happen was to abandon the programs and the projects of the previous administration. And the president and all of the ministers have committed to completing as many of those projects that we meant on ground in a way that shows that this is about Nigeria, this is about development. What is different is the ideology behind how we approach it. We will save money and put it to projects instead of filtering them away. And that is why this administration is doing more with less on projects that could have been completed if they were properly funded at the time the nation was earning $100 per barrel of oil. That is one. Two, the compelling rationale for sustaining the housing program and the economic opportunity is a rationale that will cut across party lines. It's a rationale of common sense. It's a rationale of the people who vote. That this is where our livelihoods are defined. And any government that then does not commit to it will certainly become undeserving of the votes of those people. Because once they have tasted it and they know the value, they won't give it up.
With a strategy that is building affordable and acceptable housing, creating lots of direct and indirect employment, injecting the much-needed funds in the economy, and is present in all the states of the Federation but 3. With increased funding by the Buhari administration to the housing sector and the methodical and creative approach employed by the Ministry of Power, Works and Housing in providing affordable and acceptable housing, Nigerians can finally look forward to a bright and assured future where they can enjoy one of the most critical but basic need: housing.